Does it make sense to spend so much money on a formal education?
A 25 lakhs just put in the ETF without doing anything at all would be 2.5 crores in 20 years, 25 crores in 40 years. So I did those calculations, did not make sense to me. I'm 27 right now. I have a net worth in 8 figures. We just talk about the success stories of 20-25% people who actually use the degree right. 600 people batch, they did not crack good jobs and they were not able to leverage that brand. I was literally just chasing that I want to get into a front-end management consulting role. I got into it after a year. I realized that they're making me work 80 hours a week and I'm not getting anything out of it. If everyone is doing it, how can you tell them that I'm not going to do it? They're not just gifting you money. You have to make revenue for the company and then they pay you salaries. So these are dream roles, they are marketed well, marketing ploys, everyone just wants to get into them without realizing what they're getting into.
In this episode of Konversations Cafe Podcast, we had a very, very interesting guest. His name is Pranav Arora. Pranav spoke about his experience of getting into a management consulting firm. He spoke about the difference between a back-end and a front-end role in a consulting journey. You're definitely going to get a lot of insights on the life of consultant from an early career professional point of view, and you're definitely going to know about things that a consultant's life has that you have not seen or heard before in this podcast. So make sure that you watch this till the very end. If you can't watch this podcast completely, there are shorter clips and shorts that you can watch on our channel. Do subscribe. Do tell us which are the other guests that you would want to see in Konversations Cafe Podcast in the next episodes. The podcast with Pranav starts in 3, 2, 1. Alright, thank you very much Pranav for joining us today. We're sitting at your home. We're in Gurgaon right now, a secluded place, rows of bungalows that I can see on this particular road. What I want to first discuss with you is your life, your journey, your early career. So tell us, our audience, what growing up yours has been like for you. How have you seen life while you were growing up?
I was born in Delhi, moved to US when I was very young, moved back to Delhi, shifted to Gurgaon and studied at one of the best schools in Gurgaon, DPA Sector 45. So there was a culture in our school that we used to watch a lot of US TV shows. So luckily I just stumbled upon Shark Tank US when I was very young, in 8th, 9th. That got me interested into business. So when I was in 9th, 10th, I just was trying to understand how the world is working, what the business world actually is. But unfortunately or fortunately, my father was an engineer from one of the top institutes in the country. He wanted me to do the same.
Was he from IIT?
So he cracked IIT, not the stream he liked, then he moved to NSIT Computer Science. So he wanted me to do something similar. He tried to convince me. I was too young to not be convinced by him. So I somehow got into science. So I was in my top 3 in my class throughout for 6-7 consecutive years, but the moment 11th happened, I moved to science, did not like what I was studying, got dejected, did not prepare for JEE at all. But as life progressed, I had to join an engineering college, somehow got into Manipal, did not want to do engineering at all, so just chose to do engineering in one of the local colleges near to my place. Got into engineering. After a year or so, understood that I do not like it. So I started watching Suits at that time somehow, luckily. So got an idea from that and pursued a second degree in BCom along with engineering in my second year. So I've actually done 2 degrees, one in BCom and along with engineering in those 4 years. Also just wanted to drop out, so tried my hand at business, set up a e-commerce store on eBay, got t-shirts from a local thrift store, got them printed with US Sitcoms logo, sold them across the country, tried to make some money. I was too young and naive, 18, 19, realized that cannot possibly be scaled because of obviously copyright issues on scale, even in a country like India. So then thought, how do I get out of this? Because that clearly would not have worked out. So the obvious option was to just get into a B-school preparation. But now since I had taken engineering, I belong to the most disadvantaged category in India, GEMS. So did prepare for CAT in my final year, got a decent score, prepared for the exams, finally got into few new IIMs, Delhi University, Narsi Monji, Mumbai. Then still there was something in, I was not satisfied with all these converts, had decent scores, gave good, prepared well for the GDPIs, but again the criteria was too disadvantaged. I was doing all this because I somehow figured out that I wanted to get into management consulting with very limited knowledge at that time, but that was the goal for getting into an MBA. As I moved went to Narsi Monji initially because did not have this DFS convert at that time. Spent a month there, was feeling somewhat discomforting because as you know, the fees in India was around 25 lakhs. I was not sure if I was getting enough out of it since I had Rich Dad Poor Dad just before my MBA, and I thought that money can be spent better. Shifted to DFS and set up a pizza store along with it. So that was the plan A, that I start my own business and using that MBA fee. So just somehow convince my dad that this time let me do what I want. You are anyway giving me that fees for that B school. Instead, just invest that money and I can set up my own pizza store.
So Shark Tank USA, Suits, and Rich Dad Poor Dad. That pretty much defined your life.
You can say that. Very inspired at an early age.
Right. And from there, you said that the 25 lakh decision that you had to take of getting into NMIMS did not make sense for you because you had a DFS.
I had converts from DFS, new IIMs, so I pondered over the decision. Firstly, I wanted to stay in my city, in my job, in my overall job life, corporate life. So I figured out that there's a 50% chance at least that I get placed in Mumbai from Narsi Monji. If that is the case, even if I get 2-3 lakhs extra in the beginning, that did not make much sense. And that was pretty much the difference between the two degrees. For getting those 3 extra lakhs and just getting spoon fed in a private institute versus actually using that 25 lakhs to set up a business and getting a pretty decent MBA degree seemed better at that point.
Right. But here I have a question. A lot of people do MBAs because they keep the brand in mind, right? So for example, if I'm doing an MBA from say an IIM ABC, the IIM name itself gives you a lot of value and push in your life whenever somebody or some recruiter sees that name, right? In comparison to that, a tier 2, 3, whatever, I mean, a B school that is not tier 1 B school always has to prove its mettle. So you don't have that edge that a brand gives you. Did that not play in your head?
So in terms of the tiering, I did not think that a Narsi Monji or a DFS was giving me that much of a brand difference. Narsi Monji obviously would have given me a better options at placement at that point, since it's a private college which is formalized and they have a formal placement system and those contacts. But ultimately it all comes down to, it is not as if they're gifting you money in corporate. You have to justify your salary. You have to actually perform in that particular role that you get into. So since I had seen my father do corporate for 30 years, I was aware of that. And secondly, in terms of the only things that a B school, a brand or a IIM ABC would be a different tier obviously. A top B school can give that, I've realized after 5-6 years, would be your actualization needs initially. Unless you do something which, so you have that percentile, now you're not going to the best convert you have on paper. So you have to prove that you actually were smart enough by something else, the actualization. Second, obviously the alum base and the contacts that the college offers. You can very easily get them without spending all that money. So that I realized that it was extremely easy to just, so since I was there for a month, I actually made few friends which I still just went on a trip with. So they are actually not doing very well in life, despite an Narsi Monji degree, which is a kind of a better brand in the industry. They did not crack, since it's a 600 people batch, they did not crack good jobs then, and they were not able to leverage that brand, which is the case for majority of the batch. We just talk about the success stories of 20-25% people who actually use the degree right. But so I was just a fresher out of engineering college. I don't think I had the proper shot of a CV shortlist also at that point for the top 20-25% jobs. So I did those calculations, did not make sense to me.
Correct. Talking about calculations, right now when you're talking about B school degree, the only figure that comes to your mind is you have to shell out more than 20 lakh rupees, right? does this make sense in your head? Who somebody who actually have always seen life from the perspective of Shark Tank, from the perspective of an entrepreneur who started at the age of 18, doing things, bunch of ideas, playing around, toying around the things and make money. Does it make sense to spend so much money on a formal education, in your opinion?
So at that point, I just wanted to set up a business that, I'll be honest, right now since I have studied finance, a 25 lakhs just put in the ETF without doing anything at all would be 2.5 crores in 20 years, 25 crores in 40 years. If someone actually wants a career of 40 years and he can have the same goals without spending that money, after 40 years he's basically gifting himself 25 crores. Now you can adjust that for inflation, that is still a significant amount. Putting money aside, it actually gives you a lot of freedom. So right now I'm focused on traveling. I have a net worth in 8 figures. I'm 27 right now, because everything is self-fund except for the fact that the fees which was given by my father to me, which I used to set up that business. Apart from that, everything is earned from the market or from the business or from the stock market. Most of the people around me were telling me that this is not an ideal decision to take. It turned out pretty well for me.
So here I want some personal finance advice from you also, because you invest a lot of money in stock markets. If I'm not wrong, you invest in other equity and debt options as well. Someone who is aged 22, 23, who is probably looking at an IIM A select or an IIM B select or any B school for that matter, and celebrating that they are going to go into an institute, spend 2 years and then probably walk out with like 20 lakh per year salary, right? What would be your advice? How do you look at that decision that a 22-year-old should make?
Definitely not taking anything away from someone who cracked IIM ABC. They worked really hard for it. They are going to work really hard during the 2 years of their MBA and post it. So, and for the people who are actually interested in something like that, they can make crores out of it. They can get into the right roles, keep working hard if they actually enjoy it. That is not true for everyone. So personally, literally depends on what someone actually wants out of that degree. So the fees that you are giving is actual real money upfront. The salaries you get is post-tax salaries monthly. So even if you get post-tax 1 lakh from a tier 1 college, which is again not everyone is going to get even 1 lakh out of a tier 1 college, it takes 2 years just to break even. I'm not taking time value of money into consideration, not taking increments into consideration, just basic. So basically you're working very, very hard for 4 years post cracking CAT to just break even, and then you actually start earning money. So if you take compounding, and even if you start at a 80,000 or a 70,000 per month out of B-school, and you start early without spending that, without having that debt, you start compounding, start saving, you'll actually be in a financially better situation. But I'm again not comparing an IMA with a DFS. IMA, if I had a convert from IMA and FMS, I would have personally chosen FMS.
Correct.
So it is from that perspective.
That makes sense. Let me talk about DFS. You always had a mindset that you wanted to get into consulting, right? And you went into DFS. You probably realized that in DFS, the kind of role that probably you would want to do in consulting, those kind of roles were not there. Right. So were you aware of it when you walked in there, or that awareness came later on?
So consulting companies used to come to DFS campus. I was just not aware of the back and front end divide at that point. So I thought there are consulting companies, I'll just get into consulting. So I was honestly not aware that there's a separate India practice and there are offshore practices, which now I have a lot of knowledge about later on, but I did not at that time. But the good part is, even if you get into an offshore practice, you can move to a front end practice. It is a hard transition to make, but it is possible. And to coming to your point, once I entered DFS, I realized that the role I want is not there. I became the president of the placement cell and just called the company up. They came to the campus, and I got into that role that I exactly wanted.
Right. Let's talk about a little bit, because you said that you did not know about the back end and front end roles that the consulting company offers. Let's talk for 2-3 minutes on this. What exactly happens in these back end and front end roles for somebody who is looking at this video right now and is not aware? Because when you see those companies on a placement brochure, you believe that these companies come with the roles that you want, right? Correct. You don't really take that pain to ask somebody that what is your role, right? So let's dissect it a little bit. Let's make it easy for people to understand what are these segments of these roles and what is expected of them when they are selected in a role like this.
So the management consulting that we have seen in TV shows and movies is non-existent in India. That is absolutely not there. Now there are two things. There's a India practice management consulting roles and they are offshore. The Big Four and MBBs have their arms in India which support the front-end practices in US, UK, Australia, those markets. So the difference essentially is in the India practice, you are working with Indian clients. So we are almost 4 times the population of US, but the size of the management consulting industry in India, the front end is, so the US is approximately 30x the size in terms of value. So those roles are that rare. So in US, UK, Australia, in all these geographies, people without an MBA, people with basic random degrees of bachelors are working in these management consulting roles. But in India, since the competition is such and the industry is so small, the companies have the advantage or the option to just recruit from these particular campuses. So those are the front end roles. Now the issue with that is in India the work culture is not the same as somewhat of a Europe. US are not added into this list, but Australia or Europe. So the work culture is really bad in those front end, which people don't realize before joining. So these are dream roles, they are marketed well, marketing ploys, everyone just wants to get into them without realizing what they're getting into. So I was literally just chasing this, that I want to get into a front end management consulting role. I got into it after a year. I realized that they're making me work 80 hours a week and I'm not getting anything out of it. And everyone was doing the same. So in terms of the actualization needs, now this is where my actualization needs were met. I was staffed on projects with 4 people, 3 from IIM A, B, C and the 4th one was me. So I was feeling very well about myself that I have made it. But fundamentally, if I think about what are the ends of it, I was working 80 hours for nothing because Indian clients don't pay that much. Since they have a lot of options, they don't consider consulting as that big of a deal as it is established in something like a UK or US. Coming to the back-end roles, how that work is basically cost arbitrage. We are basically spending in rupees, PPP around 1/3 of US or maybe a UK. They're practically, even if they pay us the minimum wage there, $30-40 for a basic consultant, if you per hour, if you convert that to INR, you can actually get paid handsomely in India, and the workload is almost like half or 30-40%.
What is the difference between pay in Indian standards if you're taking a back-end role from a DFS and you're getting a consulting role from an IMA?
So giving the example of Big Four, I got placed into Eva Parthanan offshore practice from DFS. After 1 year, moved to Deloitte India SNO practice. So got around a 60% hike. So that was the IMA campus offer I got after 1 year. After again 1 year, moved back to my previous team. They welcomed me with open arms since now I had apparently front end experience. So after 2 years of graduating, I was making 3x in the same job that I was placed from campus. So turned out pretty well, and now I have a 25-30 hour work week, and now just for some months now it is completely remote. Because I'm working with Australian clients, they are paying us in AUD. I am getting an INR salary, so they can pay me well for. So my hourly rate is actually rocketed. So again, an unconventional approach, but it is working pretty well for me.
How bad is this situation in India right now when we're talking about inflating salaries in B-schools?
This is the marketing ploy I was talking into. How do you ask someone to pay a 25 lakhs is not a very small amount in India. How do you convince someone to pay 25 lakhs? You tell them that every year you're going to get that 25 lakhs. Now, that is not, in some cases that is not even the CTC, they just remove the 10-20% offers. A lot of nonsense has been done to inflate the numbers really badly for that. Now coming to the DFS versus nursing Manju, it is less prevalent in colleges like DFS because they have nothing to gain absolutely. They are not charging any fees at all. Government college professors don't care that much. Students don't personally would inflate it as bad. So it is actually less prevalent in colleges like DFS. So the actual salary you'll get, I'm not saying it is exactly going to be the same, but it is going to be somewhat closer to what you saw before joining. Then a private B school who has an incentive to command that fees and get that branding.
Correct. So now talking about DFS, the kind of learning, as you mentioned, that it's a government B school. With a private B school, what comes in is you are competing with other private B schools, right? And you have to make sure that your infrastructure should be in place. You have to make sure that your teachers should be at par with industry standards, and the learning that comes out is at par with the standards. But for a place like DFS, all this is not accounted for, right? And you are pretty much on your own. But for a B school degree, then a DFS is better, or doing it online or doing an online MBA from any other platform is better in your opinion?
The kind of curriculum that is being created, the kind of teachers, and the kind of exposure that has been created in the top, I'm just talking about the top private B schools, not something like an IMT and something like an MDI or XLRI. They are actually much better. Since I spent a month at Narsimhanji, I have very close friends at MDI. No denying that. DFS is more like an entrepreneurial kind of thing where your basically luck is in your hands. What you want to do with that time, it is pretty much dependent on you. I'm not saying the academics are at par in terms of finance subjects and finance knowledges, the kind of exams that they take, that is at par, excellent level. But in terms of the other exposure that you get in a B school, that is honestly not there. How you can counter that is, so I had the gift of time. I set up a business on the side. I pursued CFA, FRM to just have those extra certifications and just make sure that everything is in line. And becoming the president of that placement cell, I actually got a chance to pitch a lot of recruiters, talk to a lot of IIMs. That took care of the exposure. So I'm not saying everyone is going to become the president of the placement cell. You can work in the placement committee and do the same. You can work with the IIM team and do the same. But you have to initiate it on your own. No one is going to spoon feed you, or no one is going to tell you to do anything. So giving an example of my wife, she also graduated from DFS 3 batches post mine. She actually did 6 internships along with her MBA in diverse profiles, with management consulting in PwC India, research with EY India, Oak North Bank portfolio monitoring, Nestle lead generation, etc. Investment banking internships. She actually sourced those internships on her own, kept doing that. Now her CV, if you're just talking about the CV looks great. And the learning, the kind of learning and the exposure she got to different kinds of profiles and the network she built is actually better than most people would do even in a tier 1 B school. So it is what you make out of it.
Absolutely. And the other part of your story, which is very interesting, is you said that you became the president of the placement committee. That's how you got the company that you probably wanted, right? That's the edge that you had created for yourself. Tell me, how then did you make that switch of getting from a back-end consulting role to actually making it to Bain and kind of doing the front-end job that you were doing?
So the only edge or difference I got using that was I was able to pitch a strategy company. So strategy was not a profile that was coming to the campus. EY was coming to the campus. They were offering around 6-7 finance profiles. I just asked them to get EY Varthanan with a strategy profile as well, because I wanted to get into that. So that was just the edge I got. Other people could have done the same even without, if someone is working in a placement normal as a member in the placement committee, they can still pitch whatever recruiter they want. It's a student run college, you can do whatever you want pretty much. Or if even you're not directly working, you can just raise that these are the kind of companies we want. So that can obviously be done, but you have to initiate it on your own. And coming to the second part, so once I was in the industry, so we were actually placed on the same designation and at the same pay from DFS as new IIMs. So I got into a very nice team, had a great run for some 14 months, actually learned a lot in that job. Anything that was lacking, I learned through that first job. Once I had that skills, I just leveraged it and moved to a front end role. But it was that experience that counted in the second interview for Deloitte that I gave. I obviously prepped very hard for the case interviews and did all those things, but it was the experience that counted more.
Right. And there's an interesting thing that I've heard from people that if you are not from a certain XYZ B school, even when you are working for a consulting firm, you are probably not getting projects, and the person who has a particular pedigree and a degree, they are getting those projects to work on. Is that true?
I did not feel so. Yes. So if a partner is from ISB or a senior manager is from ISB, you just joined from ISB, you might get an edge there. But I personally did not encounter any situation like that. So how it typically works is, so the freshers or entry level positions, most of the people are from ISB, IMABC, IML, all these colleges, and it takes people from other colleges some experience, maybe in backend or some other, maybe an Indian normal consulting company, and then they move to these roles after some experience. The difference in my case was I just moved there in a year, so I just fast tracked it without wasting much. So in ISB you have a minimum 2 years of work experience anyway. I was complete fresher, so post 1 year of MBA I was at par with that. So I just fast tracked it because I figured out that this is what excites me or I want to do. Once I actually did it, I realized that they are making me work 80 hours, and this is not taking away my personal life and my personal hobbies, so which is not going to work out for me.
That's something that I wanted to ask you next is, there are a lot of myths, there are a lot of marketing gimmicks that goes around when it comes to consulting roles in India, and I myself am part of spreading some of these myths to the world, because I have spoken to people who have glamorized this role a little bit. Can we debunk some of these myths that are associated with these roles?
So firstly, the pros, I'm not going to take anything away from it. The exposure, the learning is top notch. You learn a lot very fast. So there was a time, the project that I was talking about, so 4 people, one in north, one in south, one in east, and one in west. So I was handling the north region for a legacy watches retailer. So they were doing a digital transformation process. I was actually going to these tier 2, tier 3 cities with the RBM of that company, just trying to understand what he does on a day-to-day basis for weeks, and then coming up with a solution. Now essentially I have learned around 70-80% of what he did in the past 20 years in few weeks, which is not something that everyone can say in most of the jobs. So that part is true, but the sad reality of the flip side is there's no personal life left. All you're doing, it is extremely competitive. You can only do it if you're actually just that is all you want to do in life, because even if you just do it for the money, there are n number of places who are going to pay you much better for much less of a workload. But if it actually excites you, the kind of contacts you make and the kind of exposure you get, that is top notch. But it comes at a price that there is absolutely no work-life balance, at least in my case. And a lot of people that I worked, they were completely burnt out, depressed in their lives, that we just need out. This is not working out. How can a human being possibly be stretched so much? It came to that level.
And that's something that we have seen in the recent news headlines as well, right? Where a McKinsey consultant, he committed suicide. There was some guy who was working in a consulting firm some days back, he committed suicide as well. Because, when you're getting paid, you can't ask that question of how many hours that you will be working.
Why you can't do that is, if everyone is doing it, how can you tell them that I'm not going to do it? It's again, it is competitive. They're not just gifting you money. You have to make revenue for the company, and then they pay you salaries. Essentially, a company is a group of people generating revenue and then dividing it amongst themselves, depending on the level or the power they have. So now, if you figure it out on a bird's eye level, if you get into a company for which it is easier to make that revenue, your life is easier. You're generating that revenue easier. You're getting paid well. So now the backend, the pros of backend is, the only difference in front end and backend is, in backend you don't actually work with the end clients. You are making the exact same decks, exact same work, but you're not working with the end clients. So the final meetings and what I was talking about, the travel and going with the RBM, that someone else would be doing. You're just using that material and creating that end deck. So, but the difference is, here if it is a 9 to 5, it can stretch up to 7. It is not going to go past that in normal cases. It is not going to go on your weekends. So you have a work-life balance. And how it in a country like India, it is much easier for those backend. They're actually 10x the size in India, by the way, in terms of the workforce. And it is much easier for them to make money because they're billing in USD or AUD, and then they're converting it. The currency keeps on increasing with years. It is also countering inflation. Plus, if you convert it to an INR salary, you are getting paid handsomely, and the work hours are much more reasonable.
If you can give me a example of, while you were working for these clients, what kind of roles are you interested with? So what kind of projects do you get in the early career? So for example, 2 years down the line, what kind of jobs or responsibilities do you usually get as a consultant? And
So the project I was previously talking about, that was one of the highlights. I actually got a lot of nice interview invites because of that experience. I added it to my CV. got me a lot of excellent shortlists, which usually you'd want think that someone from an IIM ABC would get. Got those shortlists, used that experience to get a nice hike in my current role. So in terms of the actual responsibilities, not even 2 years, within 6 months, you are actually deployed on an end-to-end client project where, so in this particular case, they wanted a digital transformation of their current sales processes. So what you will typically do is you'll understand what the current situation is, then you'll come up with a strategy to what exactly are the possible areas of concern or areas of opportunity, then you'll come up with a solution. So it is an end-to-end strategy project. These kind of projects are happening in the India market as well. And similarly, now if you talk about the back-end role, the projects on a whole are actually much high level than India. For example, worked for the biggest athletic footwear brand in the world, a US-based project with the US team. The guy I was reporting to, Harvard MBA, 6 years of experience, Harvard plus MIT, excellent, super smart, sharp guy. The project was about the grey market activity across all the geographies for that part. So that particular project that we did, I actually was supporting a work stream in that end to end in a back end role. So in an athletic footwear industry, the grey market is not very mature, but in an electronics industry, it is more mature. So trying to understand fundamentally through secondary research to primary calling, what exactly is going on, what are the nuances, how do brands deal with that in that industry. We created that final deck. Now the difference is I did not present it myself. I was just a part of that research and creating that deck. But the end output was actually published in the Wall Street Journal. While in the front end, again, in India, even if you are deployed on a big project, it is not a global project or a global level project. But the difference is you are fundamentally doing everything on your own, from meeting the client, from end presentations. Now at an early stage, your manager typically would, or your partner typically would take the majority of the presentation part, but you're involved in each and every step of the process. So in 1 year, you can basically get the exposure of 2. So it does fast track the learning, but like I said, comes at an expense.
Right. We get a lot of questions by people asking that, if I'm not academically so strong and if I have not done like 9 CGPA in all the exams that I've done, am I considerate enough for these consulting firms to actually take me up?
Initially, I think that would be a hard criteria, but as you grow in experience, it fades away effectively. So if I have worked in, suppose, an EY Parthanan for 3 years, they're not going to look at my academics from 5 years back. They are going to give me a Bain shortlist based on my experience.
But if you have to step foot on EY Parthanan for a back-end role, that academics doesn't matter so much.
In a back-end role, it matters less. So in back-end roles, so they hire a variety of people across levels. So they even hire from tier 5, tier 4 colleges for a staff role to support on basic functions. So there it absolutely does not matter. But effectively in 2-3 years, if you perform well, you can move up the ranks, you can make the switch, you can effectively learn things. It just takes more time. So that is the major difference. Some degrees fast track you, or some profiles fast track you, versus some take more time.
Yeah. Would you consider then, for someone who does not have a very good academic record, or right now does not have a call from an IIM, ABC or whatever it is, and they want to get along in the consulting world or want to understand more about it, should they be doing some sort of online courses or short-term certification courses?
So I honestly did a lot of these courses excellent courses. I actually did not just do it for the certification. I don't even put it on my CV, some of it. I actually did it just to learn, and it actually helped me in the interviews. I'm not saying it, I actually don't think honestly it helps in the CV shortlisting, because these are just the regular lines on random CVs which people don't pay much heed to. But if you actually learn out of it, so for example, a Yale course was there on negotiation, mastering negotiation. I learned it thoroughly, did it in the lockdown, helped me immensely in my salary negotiations or my day-to-day life. Did a course on business strategy, helped me in that initial interview, just for the knowledge terms, not from a CV perspective. So I just did it for that. But in terms of CV, I don't think these random certifications are going to be of much.
Did you ever think that DFS as a degree or as a brand is going to be a problem in your career going forward? Or were you always confident that it doesn't matter?
No, initially we did, while doing my MBA, we did have some apprehensions about what is actually going to happen. But right now I'm in a very, very good space. So 2-3 months back I had almost converted Google for a very, very nice hike and a very nice package. Went till the final last round. Ultimately they just took, I think, 2 people, and one of it was from FMS. The other one did not even have an MBA, I think, but they had us 8 years of experience in Meta. So again, someone without an MBA and a normal engineering degree. So it was a marketing strategy role. So I had some experience of projects in there. The interviews went really well. Went till the last round and I just missed it. I'm trying to go through that again. I have gotten shortlist from Big Fours in Dubai, PE funds in Philippines and things like that. Even converted a few. Did not make much sense from a family perspective, so did not pursue them. But it has not been an issue, at least in my case. So, but again, I have those nudges of 2 degrees together. I had set up a business. I have done CFA and FRM, and my experience is actually very relevant, and I actually know how to do strategy consulting at this point. So that has helped. But yeah, so degree is not very relevant at this point. Initially, yes, it would be, but after a period of time, I don't think it is of much relevance.
Super. For someone like you, the profile that you have, what are the exit opportunities right now for you from
consulting? Like I said, consulting, you can move to a lot of things. So I'm in strategy consulting. I can move to a finance profile. I can move to a marketing profile, the Google one. Yeah. I can even move to a tech profile since I've done a lot of digital transformation processes, so projects. So this is one of the major advantages of consulting. So if you get into a strategy consulting role, you're typically doing one of the best MBA profiles where you're actually learning business or understanding fundamentally all aspects, all 4 or 5 domains that we have in MBA. You're actually applying all 4 or 5 of them. So initially, at least after 2-3 years of experience, you have the opportunity to move to either one. If you want to specialize in a particular one, you can move to that. So it gives you extra 2 years to finally make up your mind what you want to do.
What do you consider your ROI to be of the MBA that you have done?
So in terms of just monetary, I broke even during my first internship. I was placed in the top of my batch during my internship. Just with my internship stipends, I was cash flow positive. So if we are going by that standards, but not just that, gained a lot of networks, friends, experience, proper financial knowledge. So my sister just converted MDI. A lot of people join DFS because of need, not by choice. So people coming from those backgrounds do not have the kind of exposure that someone from an ISB would be. So maybe at a 95 percentile in GMAT you can get into an ISB, but the guy would have the kind of exposure to crack these top roles. And ultimately, you don't need to be top 2% or top 3% in terms of intelligence to do any kind of jobs. A lot of other skill sets also come into play. The kind of exposure and how you're able to present yourself, and the kind of basic skill set and upbringing, that also plays a big part. So in terms of the peer set, that was the major difference. But the peer set was an intelligent one, and they exposed me to a lot of things I did not know coming from an regular engineering college.
And if someone who's looking at this video wants to start learning more about consulting, what would be some of the resources that you can share with them?
Case in point, like everyone else would have talked about, I personally use the IMA, IMB case books that are being circulated. A lot of people have access to it. If not, just use your networks, they will be able to share. So they have a lot of past interview cases of how people who actually made it to these roles approached it. First, use YouTube or case in point to understand how you structure the problem, and then go through as many cases as you want. If you do that, once you are in solving that case yourself, you don't need to actually learn something. Just reading it would prep your mind to be able to solve those cases yourself.
Lovely. One last piece of advice for students who are right now looking at you, probably getting some hope that all hope is not lost if they have not made it to the top P schools. Probably the kind of motivation that you also needed at that point in time when you were making that decision for yourself.
Just be a self-starter, take matters into your hand, don't depend on anyone. And if you fundamentally think of it, a gem from a tier 2 college actually in the game of CAT and B-school admissions actually did better than 70% of students in a tier 1 college. So fundamentally, if in that game he was better than 70% of the crowd of a tier 1 college, when it comes to cracking those roles, he can again do the same. So companies need to get the work done and need to hire the best candidate for the job. Your B-school does help in the CV shortlist up to a point, but after that, if you don't crack the interview and you don't perform, nothing helps. So I've seen people from top colleges who joined with me in a back-end role, absolutely were not able to perform. They're sitting at home. After 2-3 years, they were put on a performance review. They're sitting in home right now. So it does not help that much if you are not a self-starter and you don't actually put your head to it. So if you have the confidence that you were able to do better than most people, but since the criteria was such that you were not given your due, just do it again. Just put your 100% again. The particular criteria in a B school is not the same for the companies, it's not the same in the real life. So it might take an year or two extra, but you can get there.
Super. Thank you very much, Pranav, for sharing your journey and talking a bit about things that we want to hear from people, but somehow they don't end up sharing. So thank you for that. If you liked this particular episode, do share this with someone who actually wants to know a little more about the world of consulting and is confused whether they belong to the sector or not. Thank you once again.